Hi class, for our final video for chapter 4, we're jumping into the appendix, and the appendix deals with service department allocations. So service departments, they're not involved with the operational activities of the business. They don't engage in those operational activities of the business, where operating departments, they do. They are involved with those activities that form the central purpose of the organization. So because of this, there are two ways in which a company can decide to allocate a service department's costs to the operating departments. The one method is the direct method, and the second method is the step-down method. We'll be looking at both of those in turn here. The first method that we're going to be looking at is the direct method, and I have an example problem here. So essentially, the service department costs, remember, service departments, they support these operating departments. So these costs of the service departments essentially become costs of the operating departments because they support the operating departments. How we allocate that, though, there's two methods that we'll be looking at here that we can do that. So essentially, the costs of these service departments eventually are going to get dumped in to the operating department's costs. So the operating departments have to bear that burden because these costs that are incurred to keep these service departments going, essentially, why do we have these service departments? To support these operating departments. So the direct method, this is the shorter method. With the direct method, here we have the two service departments, the administrative service department and the facilities. So far, there's administrative cost of $26,840. Well, the administrative department, they don't generate revenue. It's a service department, so we have to put that cost somewhere. So we're going to throw that cost over into the operating departments, but we will do so proportionately between assembly and wholesaling based on what the allocation base is. Here they say administrative costs are allocated on the basis of employee hours. So depending on how many employee hours the assembly department and wholesaling department use, we will use those figures to determine how much of that $26,840 both the assembly and wholesaling department will get. We'll do the same with facilities, but facilities has a different allocation base. It says facilities costs are allocated on the basis of space occupied. So whichever operating department uses more space, that operating department will bear more of the facilities costs there. So let's take a look at how we do this. So we're using the direct method. The first thing that I want you to do, get in the habit of, just so we can ignore certain numbers that we don't need, is the number of employee hours used by both the administrative and facilities departments, because we're not allocating anything to these, as well as the space occupied. We're only concerned with the employee hours with the direct method, used by both the operating departments, and the employee hours used by both, and the space occupied used by both operating departments. So between the assembly and wholesaling department, there's a total of 44,000 employee hours used. And between assembly and wholesaling, there's 36,000. We're going to assume that is in square feet, 36,000 square feet in space occupied in total between the two. So based on the proportion of the 44 and the 36 that each department uses, we will then determine how much of those service department costs will be allocated. So first, let's allocate the administrative department's costs. So the total costs that need to be allocated and distributed is $26,840. So we want to first figure out how much of that $26,840 do we need to dump into the assembly department? How much does the assembly department need to be responsible for? Well, it's the administrative costs are allocated on the basis of employee hours. So we look at, okay, how many employee hours did the assembly department use out of the total for the two operating departments? So simply we'll do a ratio there. So the assembly department used 29,000 out of the total 44,000 employee hours between the two wholesaling departments. So whatever that proportion is, we'll multiply that by 26,840. So that means that the assembly department is responsible for $17,690 of administrative costs. So $17,690 will go to the assembly department. We'll do the same thing for wholesaling. There's still $26,840 in total to be allocated. But what percentage of that will wholesaling get? Well, wholesaling is only using 15,000 out of the 44,000 employee hours. So we'll take that ratio, multiply it by 26,840, and you should get 9,150 in terms of administrative costs that will get allocated to wholesaling. Now we've completely allocated all of the administrative cost. So that's been subtracted out. So there's nothing left in the administrative department in terms of costs. And we've taken that 26,840 and put 17,690 of it under assembly and 9,150 of it under wholesaling. Now we'll do the same for facilities. How much facilities cost is there to allocate? There is 59,400. How much of that will the assembly department get? Well, we need to look at what the allocation basis. It says the facilities costs are allocated on the basis of space occupied. Well, the assembly department is occupying 30,000 square feet out of the total 36,000 square feet for all of the operating departments. So based on that proportion, we can figure out how much of that 59,400 the assembly department is responsible for. So we punch that into our calculators, we should get $49,500 of facilities costs that will get allocated to the assembly department. And we will now do the same to figure out how much gets allocated to wholesaling. So how much of the 59,400 will wholesaling get? Well, wholesaling is only using 6,000 out of the 36,000 square feet. So based on that proportion, we'll take that proportion multiplied by 59,400, and we should get 9,900 total facilities costs that get allocated to the wholesaling department. So we will end up subtracting and removing that 59,400 cost from the facilities department, and we will take 49,500 of it and add it to assembly, and take 9,900 of it and add that to wholesaling. Now, what's this question asking us? It's the total wholesaling department cost after allocations of service department costs is closest to. All right, so total wholesaling cost. How much wholesaling cost did we start with in that department? We started with $321,190. But then we added some costs from the service department allocations. We added $9,150 to that department from the administrative service department cost, and we added $9,900 of facilities costs to that department. So the wholesaling department became responsible for $9,150 and $9,900 of service department costs. So overall, the total costs within that wholesaling operating department comes out to $340,240. So that is C for, I believe this is the second to last question in that practice exam. So that is how you use the direct method to allocate service department costs to operating departments. All right, and lastly, how would we allocate service department costs if we were not using the direct method but the step-down method? So this method is just slightly different. It has just a couple of extra steps, but for the most part, it's going to be the same. So Profit Clinic uses a step method to allocate service department costs to operating departments. They have the personnel and IT service department, then family medicine, pediatric operating departments. So we want to still allocate all of that 85,728 personnel cost to the operating departments and all of the IT costs. But the difference with this method is when you hit that first service department, instead of taking that 85,728 and dumping it into the two operating departments right away, you're first going to dump it into all three remaining departments: IT, family medicine, and pediatric. And only then, once you've done that, once you get to IT, you'll dump all of its new costs and its original costs into those final two departments. So let's look at how we would allocate the personnel service department costs of 85,728. So again, the first thing is you're going to dump that 85,728 not just into family medicine and pediatric, but into the remaining service department and those 2 operating departments, to those 3. So it looks like personnel costs are allocated first on the basis of employees. So that's the allocation base here. So we aren't concerned with the number of employees used by the personnel department, but we are concerned with the number of employees used by the 3 departments that I will be allocating that cost to. So those 3 departments, the 1 service department IT and those 2 operating departments altogether, they use a total of 304 employees. When it comes to the IT costs later on, that's allocated on the basis of PCs. But when I allocate the IT costs, there's only 2 operating departments to allocate to, so we're not concerned with the IT department's PCs or the personnel department's PCs. When we get to that point, we'll only be dumping into those 2. Between the family medicine pediatric, the total amount of personal computers used between them 2 is 238. All right, so first let's look at personnel. We want to allocate the personnel cost. With the step-down method, we first allocated to the remaining service departments, which is just the 1 and the 2, or however many operating departments there are. So first we're going to allocate it to the IT department. So how much of that 85,728 will the IT department get? Well, it depends on how many employees the IT department uses in relation to all of these 3, IT, family medicine, pediatric. So the proportion of employees that IT uses is 23 out of the 304 amongst those 3 departments. So when you multiply that proportion by 85,728, you should get 6,486. So that's the amount of personnel costs that will get allocated to the IT department first. Next, I need to know how much of the 85,728 will get allocated to family medicine. How many employees does family medicine use in relation to these 3? Well, family medicine uses 106 employees out of the 304. So that means family medicine will become responsible for $29,892 of personnel cost. That's how much family medicine will get. And then lastly, the pediatric operating department uses 175 employees of the 304. So that means the pediatric department, when you punch that into your calculator, pediatric department is becoming responsible for $49,350 of personnel costs. So that's how much of the personnel costs will get allocated to the pediatric department. So all of this 85,728 is no longer part of that department. We subtract that out and it gets added based on our calculations here. IT department will get 6,486 of that. Family medicine will get 29,892. And the pediatric department will get 49,350. Next is the IT department. But the IT department, we're not just going to be allocating 21,598 costs of IT. The total costs in the IT department have since changed, right? We added some costs to the IT department. So the IT department costs to allocate are as follows. It's the original IT costs of 21,598 and the allocated costs from the personnel department, which is 6,486. So the overall IT costs that I need to allocate comes out to $28,084. All right, so we're going to take that $28,084 and figure out how much of that the family medicine department will become responsible for. Well, we allocate IT costs based on number of PCs. So the family medicine, that department uses 66 PCs out of the 238 between the 2 operating departments. So that means the proportion of the 2884 that family medicine will become responsible for of the IT costs is $7,788. So that's how much gets allocated from IT to family medicine. And then lastly, I want to figure out how much of those total IT costs will get allocated to the pediatric department. Well, the pediatric department uses 172 PCs out of the total 238. When you punch that into a calculator, the proportion of the total IT costs that pediatric department will become responsible for is $20,296. All right, so we've successfully allocated all the costs. So all of this, the total 28,084 gets subtracted out from the IT department, and of that we added 7,788 to the family medicine, and we've added 20,296 to the pediatric department. Now, what's the question asking? It's asking what's the total pediatric department cost after allocations? Okay, well, total pediatric cost, we'll do post allocations, would be as follows. Well, how much pediatric cost did we start with? We started with $162,640, but then we added or allocated some costs to that department, made it responsible for some service department costs. We added in $49,350 from the personnel department, and then we further added in $20,296 from the IT department. So overall, after all of those allocations, the amount of costs left over now in the pediatric department that it's responsible for is $232,286. And that is C for that last question of that practice exam. So hopefully that's helpful seeing that illustrated. That is the step-down method now for service department allocation, the appendix of Chapter 4. Good luck with the rest of the chapter, and we'll move on to Chapter 5 soon.